Good evening, and thank you for joining Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan's virtual telephone town hall. My name is Mike Anderson, and I'm tonight's moderator. Now, tonight we have some special guests on the line with us from the Alaska Department of Labor who will be helping us answer some questions as well. And in just a few moments, I'll be turning the call over to the senators for a few brief opening remarks. But before that, I'd like to remind everyone that for anyone that would like to ask a question tonight, please press *3 at any time, and you'll be connected with an operator. Again, if you'd like the opportunity to ask a question this evening, please press *3 to enter the queue. With that, I'll turn the call over to Senator Murkowski. Senator?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all Alaskans that have joined us on the line this evening. This is the fourth Teletown Hall that Senator Sullivan and I have hosted every Thursday. We've been joining Alaskans for an hour or so. Last weekend, we focused on small business loans and access through the CARES programs. And tonight, we're going to try to give a little focus on unemployment and the unemployment benefits available from the state and the federal government. We know that as Alaskans have been impacted by businesses shutting down, literally a whole tourist season foregone, just great anxiety about their ability to pay the rent, meet the mortgage, just pay the bills. There is a great deal of anxiety, and people are notably concerned. They see that we have moved federal legislation to help address not only their individual situation, but businesses, big and small, and they've got a lot of questions about that. So these town halls are designed to hopefully hear some of your questions and provide answers about how we can address many of the issues that you're facing. For those of you who follow the Anchorage Daily News, you saw the headline today: more than 60,000 Alaskans have applied for unemployment benefits. I think we recognize that the surge that we have seen is one that is brought about because of, again, the extraordinary economic impact that we are seeing, and in an effort to address some of the fiscal constraints and just really the concerns that families are having, combining the state unemployment benefits with a plus up on the federal side for a period of weeks going forward was part of what we addressed within the CARES Act. Prior to the CARES Act, we put in place mechanisms within the Family First Act to help Americans who are now unemployed, furloughed, laid off, those who've seen their work hours reduced because of the pandemic. So there's many issues that I know Alaskans may have, whether it's concerns about the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Program, the direct assistance programs for individuals. There are many questions out there. We'd like to try to focus tonight on unemployment, but when we get to the questions and answers, the floor is yours, so ask what you will. But I do want to tap into the expertise that we have tonight. We have the Alaska Labor Commissioner, Tamika Ledbetter. We also have Patsy Westcott, who's the director of the Employment and Training Division, which also oversees Alaska Unemployment Insurance Program. So they have graciously agreed to be on the call with us tonight. Neither the commissioner nor Director Westcott will be able to answer specific questions about individual Alaskans' unemployment applications. And that's just simply a privacy issue. It would violate your privacy and require them to look into your files right here on the town hall, which they can't do. But they are prepared to answer many of the questions about how they and their staff are working hard to meet Alaskans' needs during this stressful time, and perhaps what we can all expect going forward. So hopefully you will be able to gain some further information on this call this evening. I'll turn to my colleague, Senator Sullivan, thank him for his relentless efforts as we're trying to be responsive to Alaskans' needs, and for being on the call with all of you tonight.
Well, thank you, Senator Murkowski, and good evening, Alaska. And again, I want to thank everybody for taking time out to join us on this Teletown Hall. What we've been trying to do on these is to get as much information out to as many Alaskans as possible. Take your questions that you ask here, and then if you don't have the opportunity to have a question asked during the Teletown Hall, take your question down afterwards with some of our team members and be able to try to get back to you on some of your questions. There's no doubt we are going through unprecedented times right now. I've talked a bit about this pandemic more like a natural disaster or a war. It's also becoming an economic disaster for our state and our country. And as Senator Murkowski noted, the Anchorage Daily News article just yesterday about 60,000 Alaskans applying for jobless benefits. The numbers, of course, across the country are in the millions. Is a shocking and even horrifying number, particularly given where we were both as a state and a country just 2 months ago in February, where we had some of the lowest unemployment rates in our history. But we are where we are, and so we're going to get through this together. We're working closely with the governor and his team, the president and his team, one fight, as I like to say, in the Marine Corps. And one of the things that we recognize is the CARES Act, which was passed about 3 weeks ago, and then essentially the CARES Act 2.0, which we passed in the Senate two nights ago, and the House just passed and will be signed, I believe, tomorrow by the President, are programs that are trying to provide massive resources to our citizens across different areas. For example, small business, to our fishermen, to our tribes, to our state and local communities, and importantly, in the focus of tonight's Teletown Hall is with regard to unemployment insurance. Any legislation that is this large and put together quickly, and it was because we wanted to try to get out the resources to our fellow Alaskans and Americans as quickly as possible, recognizing the magnitude of this pandemic is going to have glitches, it's going to have snafus, it's going to have problems in the implementation. Our job is to try to answer the questions, hear from all of you, try to fix some of these to the extent possible at the implementation level, and then also work with individual Alaskans. We have a great team out there who can try to provide resources. Can't promise solutions to all the challenges, but certainly we will try to get back to you as quickly as possible if you have individual questions. In particular, some of the programs in the CARES Act, we were focused on getting resources out as quickly as possible so as not to create new giant federal bureaucracies that were cumbersome and wouldn't work. So, for example, on the Paycheck Protection Program, which we just replenished with about $310 billion for small businesses, the way in which that is deployed, the money is not through any new SBA bureaucracy or federal government bureaucracy, but through our local community banks and credit unions. Similarly, but maybe a little bit more in a more complicated way, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, the CARES Act has a very significant plus-up of the unemployment insurance program, payments, and coverage for Americans with regard to the federal side of the program. However, it is implemented through the state of Alaska Department of Labor and Unemployment Insurance Office. So that is why we are so pleased to have Commissioner Ledbetter and the Division Director Westcott to help answer the questions tonight, because this is truly an example of a federal program, state program, integrated. And like I said before, of course, there's going to be snafus, glitches, particularly as these two different programs, state and federal, come together. But I'm very pleased that we have two of the top officials in the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development who essentially will be leading the charge on this program that in many ways, unfortunately, because of the large number of unemployed we have across the state and across the country, is going to be so important. So I will end by just thanking both of them. I was just talking to Commissioner Ledbetter. She has 2 sons in the U.S. Marine Corps, which is an incredible accomplishment in terms of her own military service, and that of her husband's and that of her children. So we're honored to have her, and I just want to thank all of our fellow Alaskans for the hard work that you are all doing, the self-sacrifice that we're all doing as a state, as a country, to get through these challenging times, which we will, stronger and more resilient, but we have a lot of work to do, and our job as your delegation in Congress is to provide as many resources through as many channels, whether individuals, families, unemployed workers, small businesses, fishermen, to get us through this crisis and get us back on a strong economic road to recovery and doing it in a way that protects the health of Alaskans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. With that, we'll go with the Alaska Commissioner of Labor, Dr. Tamika Ledbetter. The floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Sullivan, and to Senator Murkowski. Greetings to you and to everyone on the line this evening. I do appreciate both senators' comments, and I agree this is one team and we have one fight. And so I really do appreciate having this opportunity this evening to provide an update on the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development's response to COVID-19. We all have witnessed the economic disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic, and we've heard about the strain the unemployment insurance systems across the country are experiencing. My team is working around the clock to get resources to Alaskans, and they're doing a remarkable job under enormously extenuating circumstances. As you mentioned earlier, Senator, we went from record low unemployment to record high unemployment literally overnight. And so during the month of March, it should be noted that Alaska's Unemployment Insurance Division saw a 632% increase in filings compared to the month of March just last year. We've onboarded, to mitigate some of that, 120 new staff, and we plan to hire another 120 over the next few weeks. So far, we've processed more than 57,000 claims, and we've released just under $83 million in payments. And so this week, we've begun to process applications for those who are self-employed, and we're looking forward to assisting those who are a part of the gig economy or they're independent contractors or self-employed as they seek relief during this time. And so I don't want to take up too much time with opening remarks, but I do appreciate this opportunity to participate in the Teletown Hall tonight. And I'll turn it over to Director Westcott, who does oversee our unemployment insurance operations. And she and her team are doing a fantastic job, and we want to do everything we can to answer questions this evening and see how we can assist UI applicants and claimants to get through our system and process applications.
Director Westcott?
Yes, so thank you, Commissioner Ledbetter. This is Patsy Westcott, Director of the Division of Employment and Training Services. I also don't want to take up too much time in opening comments because I know that many of you out there listening have questions, and we need to respond to those questions. But I do want to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Senator Murkowski and the Honorable Senator Sullivan for this opportunity for the department to be able to talk to Alaskans about what the department is doing in order to address the needs of Alaskans at this time and the influx of unemployment claims that have come our way. A few things that I do want to say before we turn it over to questions. As both Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan spoke to, and with their support, the CARES Act passed. And there were a number of provisions within that act that impacted the unemployment insurance program. And so I just want to give a brief update of where we are at with implementing those. So one of those was the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, which added $600 to regular unemployment weekly benefit amounts. And so we have been able to get that up and running in Alaska, and those payments are going out the door. We are working very hard to get the pandemic unemployment assistance program up and running. We're really encouraged and excited about where we are in our progress with that program. This is the program that is going to provide economic relief to the self-employed and the independent contractors and gig economy workers. And so we are, as Commissioner Ledbetter indicated, we are taking applications for that program at this time, and we anticipate being able to release payments on that program within the next couple of weeks. So we're really excited about that. And then the third and final is the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, and that is the provision in the CARES Act that provides 13 weeks of additional compensation to individuals that had a regular unemployment benefit claim. And so we are working very hard to get both of those up and running. And with that, I will stop with my comments so that we can answer as many questions as we can.
All right, thank you, Director Westcott. With that, I'm going to open it up to some questions here, but once again, just to remind our listeners, if you're looking to ask a question tonight, please press *3 to be placed into the queue. Again, that's *3 to be placed into the queue. We're going to start with Mark in Seward, who has questions for the Senator. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan. Thank you for taking my call. I'm an employer in Seward. I have a hotel, restaurant, and a bar. I also have two other colleagues that have been calling me daily. Between us, we probably represent 400 employees. And all three of us, as business owners, are concerned that what happened to me, and that is that I have employed full-time during this period of time, all my employees. I haven't furloughed a single person that hasn't come to me and asked to be furloughed so that they could collect unemployment. Now, I did get a PPP loan, and I'm in the process of hiring them back, the ones that said that they were afraid and needed to be laid off. I have no customers. Was covering it out of my pocket. My other friends, the same thing with 400 employees, and they are having a hard time competing with unemployment. At, let's say our average employee is $15 an hour. They make $2,400 a month at 40 hours a week. On unemployment, they're able to get $2,400 plus, at least this is my understanding from the employees that quit on me or didn't quit, asked to be laid off because they were fearful of the facility and their other employees, not even my customers. What do I do now because I'm going to pay this loan back or get forgiven, but I have to maintain 75% of my employees? with 75% of my payroll, and I'm having an awful difficult time getting to come off of unemployment to come working for me. I just read an article that said that in many states that this might be an issue, that if people are offered gainful employment and refuse it, they won't get unemployment. Is that true? But I don't want to hurt anybody. I just need employees.
That's an excellent question. Excellent question, and we're going to tag team on that one. First of all, we want to say to you, you're not the only one, sir, that has mentioned that to us, and the department is taking that very seriously. If an employee has work and has the opportunity to be recalled to work and chooses not to just to collect unemployment insurance, that is fraud, and we take that very seriously. And Director Westcott, do you want to jump in there on that one?
Yes, I would like to. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ledbetter. I definitely want to speak to this. So it is a long-standing foundational principle of the unemployment insurance program that an individual is unemployed through no fault of their own. And the second part of that is that they are able and available for work. And so for those workplaces, and this week the governor started announcing his first phase of reopening business in Alaska. And so for those workplaces that are reopening, if work is available and work is refused without good cause, and those individuals file for unemployment insurance, that is fraud, and there are penalties, severe penalties, for fraudulent activity against the program. We want, as a program, we want to know that. There is information on our website about how to report that to us. There are several numbers that you can call depending on your location, and there is an email address out there on our website about how to report that.
Mark, I think what you've heard there is so very, very important. I am hearing iterations of what you have asked here from so many who are very concerned about their ability to get their own employees back on if they've had to furlough them or to keep them on because of the increased benefits. This, just so you know, the background, I'll keep it brief because I want to get to more questions, but this is something that was raised just before passage of the initial CARES Act. The concern that you might, with expanded unemployment benefits, you might actually have situations where an employee would be earning more on unemployment than they were at their initial job, and that it would create a disincentive to go back to work. There was pretty extended debate on that. It was actually the only amendment that we took a roll call vote on with the CARES Act, and the amendment was to address just this. It failed. I had supported the amendment. Senator Sullivan did as well, but it is a concern that was recognized. And again, I think what you saw happen towards the end of passage of this bill was it was a very rushed effort to try to deal with the immediacy of the matters that we had in front of us. I do believe that this is a significant issue in the short term here, and something that we have to look at what we have put in place in terms of unintended consequences here. Now, I suppose the one thing to keep in mind is that these expanded unemployment insurance benefits do not continue throughout the emergency. There is a time limit on this additional $600 expanded payment. It is for 4 months, and then it expires. But it what you're speaking to is what I have heard from many, many, many of our small business employers that want to be able to take advantage of the forgiveness of the PPP. But in order to do so, you've got to have those employees on, and it has put an extraordinary bind in what I think was well intentioned, not only on the small business loan side, but also on the additional assistance for UI.
And Mark, it's Dan. It's Dan. I don't want to belabor this. You heard the really good points. Just the one. So you had a sense of the debate that we had on the Senate floor. There was a recognition of the problem, as Senator Murkowski mentioned. There was an amendment that essentially would have tried to would have enforced essentially a formula to make unemployment insurance with the additional federal benefit that employee whole as it relates to their current wage, not paying them more than they made when they were employed. The argument, and Senator Murkowski and I both voted for that because we thought it made sense to avoid the problem that you're talking about right now. The argument against it, just so you know what the debate was that there was a number of unemployment insurance offices in the state that said that makes sense, but it might take a really, really long time to get that amount out to people, weeks or even months, because it's kind of a complicated formula. And so that argument won out. The amendment that we supported did not pass, which I think would have mitigated the problem you're talking about. And as a number of us thought, it has created a disincentive that we need to continue to look at. I know it's put people like you in a tough spot.
All right. Senators Murkowski and Sullivan, this is Director Westcott. Just if I could just add one more thing, and that is that we will actively pursue every situation. And so we really do want employers to report to us when these situations occur. We understand that there may be an incentive there for individuals not to return to work. And that is not the purpose of the unemployment insurance program. And so I just want to encourage the employer community, for those of you that are going through this situation, to please report those situations to us. We will actively pursue those situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, we're going to go to Grant on the Kenai, who's got a question for the senators.
Thank you. I'm a small business owner on the Kenai Peninsula. Currently, I cannot open under the governor's guidelines. I did receive a PPP loan. So if I cut a check for my employees to kind of help them along before I open, are they required to go off of their Alaska UI?
Well, this is Director Westcott, and if an individual is receiving wages, whether they are working or not, if they are receiving wages, they are not eligible for unemployment insurance.
Okay, thank you, Director. Next up, we're going to go to Wynn in Fairbanks, who has a question.
Hi, this is Wynn. I had a question on unemployment for self-employed workers. I'm self-employed as a hairdresser in Fairbanks, and I've been off since the governor mandated in March 21st, and now he's released that mandate and we can go back to work starting tomorrow. But I've been trying to apply for unemployment even though it wasn't quite set up for self-employed. And now we're going back, and I haven't been able to receive anything this last month. So I was just curious if it was possible for retrograde pay, back pay, or how that works.
So this is Director Westcott, and yes, the short answer to your question is yes. Okay. We will backdate claims depending on an individual's circumstances and depending on when an individual lost employment versus when they are able to go back to work. So does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes. Can you maybe direct me to where I can learn how to apply? I mean, because I've applied for the regular unemployment, but it's not the same as for, I mean, it's not set up for self-employed, so I don't know if I did it right. So where can
sure, so this is Director Westcott, and thank you for applying for regular unemployment insurance, because that is the first test, is whether or not you qualify for regular unemployment insurance. Our intent is for those individuals that don't qualify for regular unemployment insurance, we intend to take that data and we intend to do a cross match over to the new system that we're setting up for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which is the program to help those individuals that are self-employed. So at this point, you've done everything right, and we will, if we need any additional information from you, we will be in touch with you. And the other thing that I would say is that we intend to issue additional guidance in the form of a press release and on our website within the next day or two.
All right, thank you, Director.
Hey, Mike, hang on. Mike, just real quick, because I think Wynn has a really important question. And so, because my understanding, and Director Westcott, maybe you can just help clarify this. So she's unemployed for a month. She is part of the federal CARES Act because she's an independent contractor, or self-employed, which we made sure was covered on the federal side, which may not have been covered on the state side. So, so Director Westcott, what Wynn is supposed to do is to apply and make sure she kind of continues to monitor that, start back working, but she still gets a month's worth of unemployment that would include the additional money as well? Is that what she should do, and is that how that would work for her?
Yes, thank you, Senator Sullivan, for that question. That's an excellent question. And yes, that is correct. For that period of time where this sector of our population, which isn't, it's not a sector that the regular unemployment insurance program has ever covered before, and that is the self-employed, independent contractors, and gig economy workers. And so there was a period of time where those individuals could not work. And during that period of time where they could not work, despite the fact that maybe now we are in this situation where, as the governor said earlier this week, we are going to reopen Alaska's economy, and so some of those businesses can reopen. There was a period of time where those individuals could not work. We are able to pay those individuals during that period of time. And so thank you for that question. Yes,
even though she might go back to work next week.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you for that discussion. Next, we're going to go to Dwayne in Sitka, who's got a question.
A few of my questions already got answered from some of the comments, but I have a question. It's not related to unemployment insurance, but more related to the insurance that I pay for a disaster, loss of business insurance. And we have employee 18 people, about $1 million of insurance. If there was a disaster that, like a fire or something like that, any type of disaster, that they would reimburse up to, $1 million for the business being closed. My insurance company doesn't see this as one of those disasters. Is this normal, or is this something that is going to be litigated? Does anybody know anything about that?
Well, I do not. I find it hard to believe that disaster or loss of business insurance wouldn't qualify. This would not qualify. This is not only a state disaster. This is a national disaster declared at all levels. So, without knowing the specifics of what that insurance policy is, it's hard to give you more than that. But it just doesn't seem right based on what you have said. I think we'd be happy to talk to you about it, but you're raising something that is new as far as I've heard. I don't know if Dan, you've heard anything on this, but it just doesn't seem right.
Well, I would say, Dwayne, two things. I mean, obviously, we haven't seen the contract. I think some of these insurance contracts have, I don't know if they have specific language on pandemics, but some actually do, where they don't cover it. But again, I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen yours. The one thing you can do, if you haven't already, is apply for the SBA economic disaster loans and the emergency disaster loans and the economic disaster loans. We just plussed that up 2 days ago in the CARES 2.0 legislation, and that's something that you can do, and I would recommend that you do. That's the program that, even for the application, even if you don't get the loan, which it sounds like you should, is that you get a grant up to $10,000 just on the application process. So we're tracking that closely, Alaska, for whatever reason, and we're still. I wrote and communicated with the head of the SBA today. We did not get many of these EIDL loans in the state, but we got a lot of upfront payments, grants, like I just mentioned, over, I think, 10 or over 1,000 or 1,200. But the force majeure issue that I mentioned, I think, is becoming a large litigation issue because there's a number of folks that my understanding is that on insurance coverage like yours, restaurant chains and others, retailers, are being denied insurance disaster relief for these force majeure clauses. So I think it is going to be litigation. But on the EIDL, I would, as soon as this legislation is signed into law tomorrow, I would apply for that.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Next up, we're going to go to Vicki in Anchorage, who's got a question.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking my call. Two questions on the emergency relief. I applied for it 2 days into it and received no assistance through that. I've applied for unemployment. We're a sole proprietor. My husband, myself, run the business. And pretty much from March until who knows when, we've lost all of our business because it's tourist related. And so basically we've had to refund $12,000 or $13,000 to people that had already booked. We fully refunded all of those guests. But now we have no relief at all. So I call the unemployment office. Under my application, it shows monetarily insufficient, I think is the term for the people that are with the state labor force. And so I called. They said that the unemployment office would be contacting us or asking us questions. Should we call next week to answer anything that they need from us to be able to get the relief of the $600 a week? Thank you.
So this is, thank you for the question. This is Director Westcott. So as far as the self-employment program, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, again, we are in the process of getting that program stood up. We are accepting applications for that program this week, and we hope to have benefit payments out the door within the next couple of weeks. As far as a small business loan, if that's what you're asking about, I can't respond to that. That would be, I think, a Department of Commerce question. But as it relates to unemployment insurance and the benefits that are available to the self-employed, again, we are getting that program up and running. If you applied for regular unemployment insurance, we are going to take that data over into the new system that we are standing up for the self-employed. And if we need additional information, we will certainly be sending out notification that we need more information in order to qualify you.
So
And
Vicki,
sorry,
you
go ahead.
signed up for the emergency disaster loan, the EIDL. Were you given any kind of a number or an acknowledgement? Did you receive anything from your lender, SBA, on that?
She dropped off, Senator.
Or she did, because if in fact she was able to have her application recognized, and it was just a function of the program running through all of the money that we had authorized for it, with the action that the Senate and the House have taken and that the President will sign in, that fund, as Senator Sullivan has mentioned, will be replenished. And the word that we had from SBA last week was that those who are, quote, in the queue will not have to reapply, but they did suggest that it would be important to just check back in with your lender to verify that everything was still in that lineup. If she had not received an acknowledgement or nothing had happened with that, it would be timely to go ahead and reapply as soon as that application comes back online. It's my understanding that during this past week, when there were no funds in either the PPP or the EIDL, it was not possible to submit any application. Hopefully that will be back up tomorrow as a function of passage of this legislation.
And I would just say, Vicki, if sounds like you may have, but if you are applying for or still looking at the Paycheck Protection Program, you should. I would encourage you to apply for that if you haven't already done so. Again, it got stopped last week because the funds ran out, but the funds will start flowing again probably as early as tomorrow once the President signs the legislation.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we're going to go to Jay in Ketchikan. Jay's got a question.
Hi. Hello, folks. Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, people, for doing such a great job. My questions mostly have been answered. I am a sole proprietorship, self-employed jewelry art store in Ketchikan. Our season is done for the whole year because I don't think we are going to get cruise ships. We've applied for unemployment, and we get the same answers that we are monetarily ineligible. So we've got the answer. You've answered that question. My second question is the governor said they received $1.25 billion state aid from the SBA or from the CARES Act, and he earmarked $300 million for small business loans. How do we apply for those loans? Because we are a brick and mortar store, and our store rents are $6,000-7,000 a month. We pay for 12 months. I've been here 24 years and never had to get a handout or never had to be in this situation. And EIDL, we applied for that. We've got $1,000. I got my grant, but we haven't heard about the loan. PPP, my bankers are still working on it. So what is the recourse we have going forward? I mean, there are 150 stores between Sitka, Skagway, Juneau, and Ketchikan that rely on cruise ships. And with the CDC and with the state, with the national uproar about cruise ships not being able to unload in ports, a lot of people won't take those cruises. So what do we do? Where do we go?
Well, Jay, your question is, your statement is right on the money here. You're speaking for a lot of people that we have heard from. It sounds like you are clearly trying to take advantage of what we have put out there with application to the PPP and the EIDL. If you've got the grant, that is the first step. And so now that, again, we've replenished this, the hope is that these EIDL loans will start getting moved out through the other end. In fairness, it has been almost shocking to see that the state of Alaska has received one finally approved EIDL loan. One. Obviously, we look at that and say there's a flaw, there's a shortcoming, and we're attempting to get to the bottom of that so that this next round we're not in that same situation. I think it is important to note that with this additional funding of the plus up of the PPP, there is a specific carve out of $60 billion to go to smaller lenders, lenders whose asset size is smaller. The thought is that they've got established banking relationships with smaller businesses, and so let's make sure that we are making available those funds to our true small businesses, of which we have so many in the state of Alaska. With regards to the $300 million that the governor has outlined in his response funding using the state stabilization account, it's my understanding that that relief is going to be made available through AHFC, ADA, and over at the Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development, with regards to their existing loan programs. So I don't know whether Commissioner Ledbetter can speak to that aspect of the state loans, but this is a recognition that not only throughout Southeast, but we're a state that is so heavily reliant on the tourism sector, on the visitor industry for so many of our small businesses and operations. And so in addition to the direct assistance to individuals and to businesses, we're trying to ensure that we'll have a level of economic recovery, but it is I think a reality for so many that this season is going to be extraordinarily challenging for far too many Alaskans.
Senator, I think you hit the nail on the head. Because of the way our industries are so closely aligned, this certainly makes it additionally challenging for small business owners and those that rely very heavily on our seasonal tourism industry. And so we're working feverishly, the Department of Labor in collaboration with Department of Commerce and the governor's office, to try to come up with ways to facilitate and mitigate some of the strain that this pandemic has placed primarily on our industries here in Alaska. And I believe there will be more information forthcoming concerning that.
But can I just add and maybe ask a question for Jay? So as a sole proprietorship, he can apply for the federal unemployment insurance program if he wants to do, and the EIDL loan, which he should, and a PPP loan. And one of the things, Jay, you should know that we're working on, and I was communication with the Secretary of the Treasury again today on this issue, is trying to enable particularly our seasonal businesses like yours to apply for a PPP loan based on the amount of employees you had last summer, not the amount you have now. Now, it sounds like with yours, maybe that won't make a difference, but as you can imagine with some of our bigger, some of the small businesses that really ramp up employment in the summer and don't have a lot now, getting regulations from the Treasury that enables that will enable the PPP loans for small businesses that are seasonal in Alaska to be bigger. And we've been pressing that hard. And I do want to say, and I've heard this from so many Alaskans like you who I'm sure have been working your tail off for years building your business. I wouldn't view any of this as a handout. There's nobody who did anything wrong. This is more like a natural disaster. I've been referring this as a, business interruption insurance, or, there's so many hardworking Alaskans who have just gotten nailed with this through no fault of their own. That's the whole thing here. That's why we're trying to surge as many resources as possible. But I would encourage looking at all of these programs, and again, maybe for Director Westcott, let's assume Jay does get a PPP loan, then he would have to stop receiving unemployment insurance. But in the meantime, the advice I've been hearing is that they should apply. Is that what you would advise him?
Yeah. So thank you, Senator Sullivan. That is an excellent question, and so I'm not really truthfully up to speed on the PPE program. What I would say is this: any self-employed, independent contractor or gig economy worker that normally doesn't qualify for regular unemployment insurance, I would encourage them to apply for the unemployment benefits that the CARES Act provided under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And we, as a department, will work through those eligibility issues. And so I would encourage him to apply, absolutely.
The sole proprietorships are clearly covered under the CARES Act.
Yes. Again, I would encourage any self-employed, independent contractor or gig economy worker to apply. That's why the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program was provided for under the CARES Act, and that is what we are working on. That's the business that we are in, is to get that program up and running and to get those benefits paid. So yes, I would encourage anyone to apply that doesn't qualify for regular unemployment insurance.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we're going to go with Marilyn from Homer, who's got a question.
Hi there, this is Marilyn. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So kind of in relation to, well, all of it, I guess. We're a small business that has some year-round and has an influx. We're in tourism, so we bring in more in the summer. So 2 questions. Some of our team, year-round team, we've had to either lay them off. That was clear. Some we've been able to just reduce their hours so they have something coming in. And under the understanding that if their hours are reduced, they still can eventually also get the federal support of $600 an hour till we can get them back up to full speed of hours. And we have new hires or rehires who come on seasonally that we can't hire so far yet financially and don't have a need so far with work. I'm hearing I understand the unemployed who qualify for unemployment, the self-employed, the gig workers, and the independent contractors, but there's this in-between group that are employees, but they don't qualify for unemployment, because they're not going to get hired, and they weren't hired, but we agreed to hire them, and then some that we've reduced their hours there's nowhere on the Alaska website that tells them that they're actually still included in the CARES Act. Are they?
So this is Director Westcott, and if it's okay, I'd like to speak to that. So anyone that is employed less than full time, I am encouraging them to apply for unemployment insurance benefits. Any wages that they do earn during a week would be deducted from their regular unemployment insurance benefit amount. With that said, as long as their entitlement for the week is still at least $1 of regular unemployment insurance benefits, then they would still get the extra $600 add-on. So anyone that is working less than full-time should go ahead and apply for regular unemployment insurance.
And Marlene, that was actually a very good question. Thank you for asking that, so we were able to clarify that answer.
And the one issue on the PPP that we're working on, we haven't resolved it yet. We will definitely announce it if and when it gets resolved. As I mentioned earlier, the situation like yours is exactly what we're trying to help fix, which is the PPP loans are a function of your payroll. The bigger your payroll, the bigger the number of employees, the bigger the potential of the loan. The problem with the way the program was set up is that seasonal businesses in Alaska right now typically don't have a lot of employees, but they would if we had a strong, robust summer season. So what we're trying to do is get Treasury to issue regs to clarify their the way in which they view seasonal businesses, to enable them to say you can actually apply for a PPP loan, not based on how many people you have on payroll now, but on an 8-week period between June 1 and September 1 of 2019. If that happens, we will get the word out. We're checking, we're pressing them to do that, because then that will enable small businesses that are seasonal, that don't have a big number of employees now, to have a bigger PPP loan to help them get through this cushion if they can base it on how many employees they had last summer. So we'll keep you posted on that important issue.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we're going to go to Mrs. Terry Pruitt, who has a question for the Senator.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. I had one question and then one comment. My question is for the Unemployment Commissioner. I own a salon, and we're getting it put back together or in compliance so we can get back to work next week. But I have two stylists who are moms. They have kids that are having to be homeschooled, and they're not able to come back to work. They have to stay there with their kids. And then I have one employee that is medically compromised, and she is not able to come back to work. Is that going to be a problem with them on unemployment?
That's an excellent question, Terry, and I'm going to hand that over to Director Westcott.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So there's not an easy, definitive yes or no. Every situation is different, and it depends on every individual's circumstances. And so what I'm going to go back to is, if work exists and an individual has to refuse that work without good cause, then potentially their benefits could be denied. I can't give you a definitive yes or no, because I don't know each of those individuals' circumstances. But what I will say is that our staff will look into their situation. They will take all of those facts under consideration and determine whether or not those individuals had good cause to refuse being able to come back to work.
But can I just jump in here, Director Westcott? I would imagine that what Terry mentioned is a pretty common question dealing with now people who are employed and might be able to go back to work who have to watch over their kids because there's no school and everybody's homeschooling. Do you think, and again, I don't know what the issues and how the state unemployment system works, but do you think that would be frequently enough asked questions that you guys could get a frequently asked question and maybe make a ruling on it? So it seems to me there's probably hundreds of Alaskans who have a similar question, and I think if we can be lenient on that one, it might be able to alleviate a lot of the challenges if so many have the same issue.
Sure, and I can appreciate everything that you've just said. And again, I cannot give you a definitive answer because every individual's circumstances and situation are different. And so some of the things that we are required under the USDO guidance is looking at each individual separately and looking at their circumstances separately. And so for some individuals, they may have no other alternative. For others, there may be alternatives with regard to alternative methods of daycare or oversight. And so I can't give you a definitive yes or no. It depends on an individual's circumstances.
But in any case, though, Director Westcott, what you're advising is that the application be made for the unemployment benefits and give that individual an opportunity to establish whether or not they have good cause as to why they could not return to work. And then you are saying that you would review that on a case by case. So it's
Senator Murkowski, that is absolutely what I am saying and recommending.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, thanks. Next up, we're going to go to Larry Taylor, who's got a question for the senators.
Hi. Thank you, Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan. I'm a catch-can employer with a highly trained summertime workforce here and in Juneau. And so far, it seems like I'm out of luck. I've applied for the PPP and I applied for the $10,000 grant for the EIDL. So due to cancellation of the state's cruise ship smoke emission observation program for the entire summer, I'd like to pay some of the wages this summer, keep my technicians, and not have to train new people next summer because that's very expensive. If I get the PPP, I now understand I'll not be able to use it because it'll not be forgiven since my employees are not working, so they're not on the payroll. And secondly, my company is an LLC, so I'm considered self-employed. And I don't see anywhere where I or my business qualify for disaster relief funding to recover what I've spent in training costs for this canceled season, and that I'll have to spend again next year, whether I get refunded or not. So those are my two questions. Any thoughts?
Well, Senator Sullivan has pointed out the real omission in the PPP and the limitation in that It fails to recognize the seasonality of so many of Alaska's businesses, and yours is clearly reliant on cruise ships coming in and out. The dates within which the program is confined in terms of when you have to have those employees on your payroll is limiting, and that has been, as Dan mentioned, that has been something that we've been trying to work through for weeks now. And again, we are hopeful that we'll be able to get some regulatory forbearance here with regards to this aspect of the PPP. But it is limiting, and it has put many of our more seasonal business enterprises at a real disadvantage in being able to utilize this PPP. So my hope is, and again, what we've been working on here pretty aggressively, is that the Secretary of Treasury will be true to his word and provide the regulation that will allow for whether it's your business operation or others to be able to have greater flexibility with when and how you can pay those seasonal employees. I wish that I had a more clear answer for you at this point in time, but we don't have it yet.
So Larry, let me just jump in here, because I think your situation is exactly what we have been pounding. I mean, I raised this with the President, I raised it with the Secretary of the Treasury. Just a couple days ago, I raised it with him again this morning. But here's what I think, and I don't want to jinx it, because if these regs get out, or if they get out too slow, this is what I've been telling them. We got to move, right? But if the one thing that could work is if the regulation comes out soon that says you can use for your current PPP loan the number of employees you had at a certain time, an 8-week time last summer. That's what we're trying to get them to do. Then your loan would be a lot bigger, because your loan's a function of your payroll. And then you could pay those 15 employees this summer, and then in the 8-week period in which you're paying them, the loan would be turned into a grant. So you would actually still be able to use the PPP in the format that most people are most excited about. It is if you keep your employees, even if they're not doing work, and you're paying them, and you do that, and 75% of your loan goes to that payroll, then that loan, at least for the 8-week period, transforms into a grant. So we're trying to get these regs done so you can still do that and keep people employed, even if they're not working that much, and get you the ability to get a bigger loan that can be forgiven and turned into a grant for the 8-week period in which you're paying them. So stand by. We're pressing them every damn day to get these regs out that can help our seasonal workers do that, or seasonal small businesses do that.
Thank you, Senator. We are way over time. We're going to take one last question from Mike Coons. Mike, you're on with the Senator, but please keep it brief. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. First thing, when you were talking about the amendment that you tried to get through for the unemployment, it kind of goes right into what one of my biggest gripes is, and Senator Sullivan, you and I have had this discussion before. My understanding of those amendments, that was the 60-vote rule, the filibuster rule aspect, and I think we really need to this is way beyond the time now where we really need to go to a nuclear option. So that's just my up comment on that. The main reason I'm calling is I'm hearing I saw a nurse on Facebook today. She was talking about she's down in Oregon, and I'm also hearing this is happening up here at Providence, where you have nurses working in the hospital, and they're what they call contract nurses, but yet they're being laid off because they don't have enough patients outside of this virus to keep work. So the hospitals are losing money. So then they're firing their nurses, but the nurses are contract nurses. And this one particular nurse was really concerned that she wasn't even going to be eligible for unemployment because she's a contract nurse. Director Ledbetter or the other director, could you guys help me out with that so I can pass on that information to them?
Sure. So this is Director Westcott, and there's a couple of different complexities to the issue that you just raised. The first being whether or not that individual is really truly self-employed as an independent contractor, or whether they really truly are an employee of the hospital and covered under regular unemployment insurance. In any case, what I would say is though any of those nurses need to go ahead and file for unemployment insurance. We end up determining that they are an employee of the hospital and should have been covered under regular unemployment insurance, or whether we end up determining they really truly are an independent contractor and should be covered under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. Either way, they should file for unemployment insurance assistance.
Okay, Director, I appreciate that. And with that, we are out of time tonight. We went way over, so we need to wrap this up. To our guests from the Department of Labor, thank you so much for joining us. And for those who called in, we appreciate you all for participating. If you wanted to ask a question tonight but weren't able to, please hang on the line after we end, and you'll be prompted to leave a message, and we'll work to get you an answer. With that, have a great evening, stay safe, and good night.
Same to you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.